Hi, my name is Rachel. On my channel, I talk about reading and writing, and today got a little bit of a discussion over the last book that I read. So that would be Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. My husband accidentally sat on my paperback, and now it has a little mark. So this is going to be a little bit spoilery. Basically, this book has caught me in a very unusual situation. Normally, when I'm reading something or watching something that can be interpreted in a couple different ways, you know, I might have my own interpretation, but I'll hear somebody else's be like, oh yeah, I can totally see that. Not for this one. I had my interpretation. I have seen, sorry if you can hear my Christmas clock in the background. I have seen other people's interpretations online. I've read reviews. I read author interviews. And I disagree with everybody, including the author. And it's not even like, and I can't see how people, including the author himself, thinks that this book is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And I know that's like kind of like, oh, you're disagreeing with the author on the text. Like, listen, within the realm of like professional, like literary criticism out there, text is text. And yeah, like when the author literally says what it means, you can factor that, but it can also exist outside of the author's expectations. And admittedly, though, it feels a little weird that I disagree with the author himself on what the heck is actually going on within the text. So what I'm going to do, first of all, if you've not read this book before, if you've read the book before, you're more than likely going to be clicking on a spoilery video like this anyway. But if you're just kind of curious and you're not sure if you want to read this book yet or not, so before I head into like spoilers, just a quick overview. This book is about this family. It's mostly narrated from, it's narrated from Mary's perspective, and she's this 8-year-old girl, and her older sister Marjorie, she's like 14. She is showing symptoms of schizophrenia. And this is taking a really big toll on the family because obviously it's a very severe mental illness. It's not something to be taken lightly. I mean, it's really kind of impacting the family emotionally, but also financially. They want to get her proper treatment. Can't always afford it. And so eventually they find a priest who believes that Marjorie is actually possessed by a demon, and they end up doing this reality TV show about it called The Possession. So, everything that I had heard about this book prior to me reading it has indicated that it is a possession story, but you also get that skeptical point of view. I have read interviews with the author, and he basically said that he wanted to do his own take on the possession, subgenre of horror. And he wanted to make it so skeptics and believers have equal sources of evidence. And I don't see where the equality comes in whatsoever in the evidence that's presented. So again, gonna have some spoilers. This is kind of like your last chance if you want to. I just knocked into a lamp. That's next to me. So if you want to read this book, you don't want to hear what I have to say about it, I would click away now. I'm not going to give like major spoilers, but like, okay, yeah, I'm going to give major spoilers. So yeah, click away if this is something that you haven't read, you want to read. I really don't consider myself to be the most skeptical person ever. Like I mean, how do I want to say this? When I'm reading a book about a possession, I'm going to believe that it's a possession. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel as though I wouldn't call myself a heavy skeptic. You know what I mean? And so going into a book like this, where the author wants to provide ample evidence for belief either way, I expected fully to lean towards the supernatural, right? But I see absolutely no evidence of something supernatural happening in this book at all. Which is crazy because I picked up this book thinking I was going to get a supernatural possession horror, right? Well, where? Okay? I see so many people say they're not sure what they believe, if it's possession or supernatural, or if it's supernatural possession, or if it's literally just Marjorie's schizophrenia. And then I also see people that fully believe that it's a demonic possession. And a lot of the evidence that they cite for this, in my opinion, comes out of absolute left field. And it's a lot of bold assumptions that I don't think we can make based on what we've got. There's one thing that may have influenced my reading of this book is, while I am absolutely not a mental health expert, I'm not an expert on schizophrenia, I feel like if you're in my position and you've had a family member with that illness, I mean, yeah, obviously I'm going to be a little bit more knowledgeable about it compared to somebody who's never known anyone with the illness. So that's my background. I did have a family member with that illness. They did pass away. That being said, in the initial parts of the book, like the first half-ish, 1/3, I think 1/3, yeah, I think it's in 3 parts. When Marjorie is showing her symptoms, to me, they didn't read as possession because they matched my understanding of possible symptoms of schizophrenia. And I want to, again, another disclaimer, I understand that no 2 people with schizophrenia are probably going to show symptoms in exactly the same way because it's such a complex illness. It's just based off of, my own personal knowledge and what it can look like. I know that, there are some people who are able to really overcome, really able to live with it in a way that's still fulfilling and doesn't disrupt their lives as much. But that wasn't the case for my family member, and it's really not the case for Marjorie. Some of the symptoms that she has that cannot be explained by schizophrenia can actually be explained by side effects of medicines prescribed for schizophrenia, like the vomiting and things like that. Granted, her vomit is green, which is giving Exorcist, right? And Paul Tremblay in this book is constantly nodding to classic horror and possession horror. So he's referencing The Exorcist. He's referencing even Paranormal Activity and stuff like that. And honestly, I honestly think that it's green just to make us think of The Exorcist. But theoretically, she could have eaten something with green food coloring. Okay, you know what I mean? I'm not going to use the fact that her vomit is green, so sorry, this is so disgusting, as strong evidence that it's a possession. Because literally the first 1/3, that's all I really got. That and her voices that she does, anyone can imitate a voice. So again, I don't see it there. And so here's the thing, again, schizophrenia is a major, major illness, right? And it can really change people's behaviors in ways that can be frightening to the people around them, especially when they're seeing this really big transition where you're used to, Mary is used to her older sister Marjorie having, one set of behaviors. And now they've changed and they're completely different. And sometimes she can come off as kind of scary to Mary. And honestly, there are times where she's kind of scaring me too a little bit, right? And it's weird because the only scary stuff that's happening is seeing her behavior change. And to me, that makes it feel almost like a really harrowing, realistic fiction rather than a supernatural horror. So, since that's the only thing to me that's really frightening, it's the only thing that's frightening Mary, it's the only thing that's kind of frightening me, it kind of left me wondering for a while, where is the horror, right? How can this book be allowed to be classified as horror, even if you interpret it as not being about a possession? And for me, I found the answer about halfway or onwards. I think it really hit me when they're first starting to talk about, first of all, the family decided to do this television show, The Possession, so that way they could help pay for Marjorie's actual treatment. But you have this disconnect between the mom and the dad. Dad has fallen down this very religious rabbit hole, and he's starting to really think that Marjorie is possessed and that this could really help her if they go through with the TV show, they get help from the priest, they do an exorcism. The mom is very skeptical, and she's like, listen, I'm going to do this so we can make all this money and we can get a real treatment. Which might sound a reasonable enough reason to do the TV show. In my opinion, it's not. The TV show is heinous. They are hiring an actress to reenact absolutely awful, embarrassing moments of Marjorie showing these symptoms. And I just don't, to me, that was the first moment of realization that the horror, based off of my interpretive framework, the horror seems to lie in how the adults are handling Marjorie's illness, because it is mortifying that her family was like, yeah, let's do this TV show. It's going to be great. We're going to get this money. We can get her help. Like, at what cost, though? Like, it's not stuff that you would want to advertise about your daughter, who is really too young to fully consent to a television show about what she's going through, in my opinion. So the fact that they're doing the television show to begin with and what they're showing, to me, that was like the first horrific element. The next ones are probably just in general, the way that the adults are reacting to every single thing that Marjorie says and does. It's so clouded by belief. The second that they start to believe that she might be possessed, every single thing she says and does is to be explained by possession, including stuff like having knowledge that she shouldn't have. But this is set in 2020 something, right? Or 29 it's in the 2000s. I don't know. But she could Google all of this. And if I was her, if I was the star of a television show about being possessed by a demon, if the adults in my life acted like I was possessed by a demon, I would look up stuff about this topic. And I would learn a lot. And I would probably do what Marjorie did and say a lot of these facts to the adults to make them angry. Everyone acts in the book like, oh, she shouldn't know this. Like, hello? What do you mean she shouldn't know this? Do you think that, she's 14 years old. She's never heard of Google. She can't use a keyboard. She can't use her phone. Like, that was stupid. The dad is increasingly crazy. Like, not only is he just completely ignoring the possibility that it's just straight up schizophrenia, he's also, like, you see his behavior start to unravel and he becomes a bit more volatile. Likely underneath all of this stress, but also, like, falling into a sort of role for the cameras versus, like, the reality. I don't know. Dad's complicated. To me, all of these bits of horror lead up to the key moment that should be the peak, even if it is a supernatural horror, which is the exorcism. For me, I'm just afraid of Marjorie's safety because she has all of these adults acting like this is the answer, when in my mind, it's not at all. And I thought, because, I didn't look at author interviews until, like, I was about 3/4 of the way done with the book, because I was just feeling this disconnect between what I was seeing and what everyone online was seeing. I really thought that this is what the author was trying to do. I saw no other way for this. I still see no other way for this. That's why I'm making the video. But he even refers to the priest and like the cameraman and everyone that's going to be a part of the exorcism of getting the demon out as a legion at one point. And I was like, well, okay, we're flipping this narrative. So that way our demons, our bad guys, are the people who think that she's possessed. An argument that someone against me could make is that Mary, since she was 8 when this occurs, and we're seeing her recall these events in an interview style with a woman who's going to write a book about her life, you could argue that she's kind of the ultimate unreliable narrator, because she wants to believe in the best of her sister a lot of the times, and she's so young, and she straight up says that some of her memories are a little bit clouded by, like, the television show, but she's still able to differentiate a lot of events. Like, okay, this is how the TV show made it look. This is how I remembered it actually happening, right? I overall think that her analysis of the situation, her initial observations of it as a child, her adult observations, which we see on her blog, I honestly think that they're kind of spot on. Like, I look at the evidence that she's presenting and I see no other way. And I honestly feel like, yeah, you could argue that she's an unreliable narrator, but even when you have an unreliable narrator, if you want their account to be wrong or tainted in some way, there are strategies to use as a writer where you could show us these little glimmers of truths that they're ignoring. And I'm, for the most part, not seeing that. The only moment that I feel that she's truly unreliable is when she talks about how this all wraps up after the TV show. And the thing of it is, she analyzes the television show and the way that the adults were reacting to Marjorie and these very sophisticated forms of like literary criticism. And I know the way that her blog is written is not a very sophisticated tone, and she rambles a lot and stuff like that. But the language that she's using is like common language that we see in actual literary criticism, right? And so she's able to analyze the television show, comparing it to the events as she actually remembers it and stuff like that. But the one thing that isn't recorded is after the exorcism, all of the cameramen have to leave because everything kind of comes to a head. During the exorcism, a lot of, like, there's a drawer that keeps, like, moving. Marjorie seems genuinely freaked out. She's not doing that. She finds a device that they use to rig it to make it seem like she or the demon are doing that somehow. Then she's running after Mary. Mary runs down the stairs. Marjorie jumps off of the stairs and gets injured. They try for like a second in her analysis to make it almost sound like there's a moment where Marjorie jumps within the camera footage that you can hardly tell the difference between visually Mary and Marjorie. And there's some people online that act like they switch bodies in that moment. I don't see that. I don't see how a sentence, like a couple sentences talking about how they are kind of the same in that moment or they look the same. I don't know. You'd have to read it for yourself or reread it for yourself to really decide, I guess. I just don't see it. And I also don't see what the purpose of that was going to be. Like, if the demon transfers to Mary, it has certainly not done that much damage. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. So that's why the camera crews leave. And so the events that occur in the end after the show is done is the entire family gets poisoned except Mary. Dad continued to go into a downward spiral. He bought a poison. Marjorie found it, used it to poison everybody. And guys, this is totally, in a book that references every single possible reference of a horror book or a movie to contextualize why the show made certain decisions and how those, viewings and readings can impact our interpretation of Marjorie. Nobody mentions we have always lived in the castle, where there is two sisters. And so keep in mind, Mary is spelled Merry in Head Full of Ghosts. And her full name is Meredith. In We've Always Lived in the Castle, it's Maricat. Okay? And it's two sisters, and the whole family gets poisoned. Like, it's literally the same thing. Nobody makes mention of that. There is no using that to contextualize the event. Mary says that she's the one that technically was manipulated into giving the family the poison. However, DNA evidence disagrees with that. DNA evidence says that it was the dad that did it and that his DNA was on there. I think that in her head, she changes the narrative because she'd rather deal with herself being manipulated and at fault by Marjorie rather than admitting the fact that her father killed them. Because again, she doesn't see the connection that everyone else is seeing. She can't admit that she is likely using We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson to frame the event. That's the only time that I think that Mary doesn't seem to understand reality. She's not able to make that comparison. She's not able to understand that she is subconsciously taking media that she's already consumed to view the situation. So, you're like, Rachel, why does this matter? And it's literature, so it really doesn't. However, if this was just such a bizarre experience that, like, I see nothing supernatural about this book at all. And everybody else seems to. And, you know, like I said before, we don't always have to consider authorial intent to come up with our own interpretation of the book. I think that my interpretation is valid. However, if we look at my interpretation and if we think about what it means, we could look at this book as a criticism of how women have been treated for forms of hysteria, which is, you know, the term that people would use for sick or mentally ill women when they didn't know exactly what was wrong. We can view possession as historically being a way to mistreat women. We can also view this as a way of critiquing those who just ignore flat out science, right? If we're looking at my interpretation of nothing supernatural is happening, right? But the thing is, those are really important themes, and it would be very different to be led to a story that's supposed to be about possession, and then you read it and it's not, right? I almost feel like the fact that Paul Tremblay, no offense to him, I'm not hating on him. This is just my experience reading his book, and I'm honestly, to be fair, A Head Full of Ghosts is not badly written at all. Like, it was a very engaging, fun story. Like, fun, scary, but, like, it was a good story, right? I would totally try reading his other books, but here's the thing. Rather than choosing any side, he's basically trying to set up a story where you could believe one way or another. As a result, he's not committing to any real message, which almost trivializes the ones that I get out of it, if that makes sense. Because here's the thing. You can create a book where the ending is super ambiguous, but there's still a clear message to get out of it that ties us together. We see this, a classic example of this is in the book Life of Pi. You can choose to believe the main character's account of what happened to him as he said it, which is like the religious side of that narrative. Or you can believe the more likely scientific version of events. But the message that's supposed to tie this book together is that it doesn't matter which one that you believe. Everyone believes that the main character's account is the better story. Obviously, that's very vague messaging, but we totally could have done that in Head Full of Ghosts. Because no matter how you look at the situation, this girl was horribly mistreated. Whether she's possessed or not, she's horribly mistreated by her family. And I think that he kind of tries to go with this. Like, we have some kind of final words from Mary. Here's what she says. Most days, I really don't know what to think or believe. All that I do know with 100% certainty is that Marjorie and perhaps my father were very sick. Our entire family was put under impossible stresses and strains. We were all manipulated, and we were all irrational, maybe even willingly so. And when I was 8 years old, I was manipulated into poisoning my sister and parents. But again, like, we don't even have evidence that she poisoned them. Like, I don't know. It's like she starts to get to our main message in that moment, the same way that they do it in Life of Pi. It's through dialogue, and our main character kind of teaches us that ending message, whether you believe his story or not, right? We are approaching it. The last thing that we get to was, my family was sick. We're put under stresses and strains, manipulated, irrational, maybe willingly so, but there's no but. Like, what's the but? What's the critique of society? What's the critique of the adults? What is the point, right? And instead we just get to her being manipulated to poison her parents. Which I don't think, and the DNA evidence suggests, that was not the case. So, yeah, this was so weird of an experience. Like, I don't interpret this the way that anybody seems to interpret it. I mean, I think I've found like one or two people on Reddit that were kind of on my boat. Like, this is not what this book was about. This was about a girl that was sick. This was not about a possession. But again, there's something about the way that what the author was attempting to do, in my complete massive difference in interpretation, I just don't 100% get the point. But that being said, and like I said before, I actually enjoyed reading the book overall. I really like Paul Tremblay's writing style. So even though I'm criticizing the way that he packaged it and the way that he messaged it, I'm not opposed to reading more of his work. I gave this a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads, I believe. Rounded up from a 3.5. So, like, and I think that's why I'm kind of so mad about it. Like, I think that there's a lot of good qualities to this book. The messaging and the way that I look at it is so different the way everybody else looks at it. I don't know. If you've read this book, I would love to know what your interpretation was. We're going to make this a spoilery comment section. But yeah, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, if you think I sound crazy, like, that's great. I want to know what other people like in the wild are thinking that watch my videos, I guess. Thank you for listening to this extremely rambly discussion. Hopefully you got something out of it. I kind of this is a good way for me to process my mixed feelings about this book. But yeah, I hope that everyone is having a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.